Wordle kind of popped up out of nowhere and has been surprisingly popular for a knowledge and logic game. If you aren't aware, Wordle is a word guessing game played by spelling out words. The computer grades your word by telling you the correct letters in the wrong positions by marking them in yellow, and correct letters in the right positions in green. You have 6 guesses to find a word the computer picked and can only submit valid words. This makes it as much about the logic of whittling down possibilities as it is a knowledge game about what words it could be, with some strategy of using other words to check letters. For me, though, it somewhat rekindled an interest in the origins of this particular kind of game. I'm sure most people are familiar with Mastermind, which plays much the same but with colors. However, there were other variations, with some being older, that really caught my interest, and I thought it might be fun to take a look at some of them. And interestingly, every single example I have today is from the 70s, so let's take a look at what Wordle would be like 50 years ago. Let's start out with a refresher of the classic Mastermind you likely know about already by taking a look at the original version from 1972. This version of the game was released by Invicta, who would go on to create or license most versions of Mastermind you likely remember. The game is played on a grid by putting large colored pegs with 6 varieties into holes to create codes, and small colored pegs to indicate results. The code maker starts out by choosing 4 large pegs to create a code, and then hides it from the code breaker. The code breaker then makes a blind guess as to what the code could be. From here, the code maker looks over the guess and uses white pegs to indicate a correct color peg in the wrong position, and a black peg for a fully correct peg placement. However, the code breaker does not know which response pegs correspond to their guess pegs, and must also deduce that. From here, the codebreaker continues making up to 10 guesses to eliminate options and narrow down to the correct result. Having the codes be color-based means that there is only the logical process of elimination to determine what the correct code may be. Now, the only thing the codemaker does during this process is validate guesses, which doesn't really involve any further strategy, which is why it works well as a computer game for Wordle. But oddly enough, this concept started out as a computer game known as Bulls and Cows, or Moo. Early interactive computer programs were typically text-based and designed to print one line at a time to be displayed on hard copy teletypes and potentially even remote over a phone line. This made playing games somewhat difficult, but those with the limited access to the computers still found a way, making games like Zork, Star Trek, and Hunt the Wumpus that could all work one line at a time. So a puzzle game like this was a perfect fit, leading to the creation of Bulls and Cows. This older code is originally from the 70s, written in PL1, meant to run on a Multics mainframe. I don't exactly have one of those kicking around, but this game concept was popular enough that it was rewritten multiple times in different languages. I have a version here, first written in 1977 by Mike Arnatov, that was eventually ported to C and can be run on Linux. For a closer to period correct vibe though, we'll use a glass terminal to play it. The computer version of the game is played with numbers rather than colors or letters. The computer starts by picking a 4-digit number and asking you to make a guess of it. The validation is given as bulls and cows, with cows representing correct numbers with the wrong location, and bulls being a fully correct digit. The line-based nature of the game leaves your previous guesses and the responses visible on the display as you continue playing. This particular version of the game uses all numbers from 0 to 9, which makes it considerably more difficult than the 6 possible values from the board game. The game plays identically to Mastermind elsewise though, as there are still no patterns you can use to guess with, making it a pure game of logic. The logical nature of both games actually attracted a number of programmers to try and solve the problem algorithmically, which led to this paper by Donald Kuntz breaking down how to programmatically guess the answer in the minimum possible turns. And it turns out to be 5 for a game with 6 input variations. The computer version of the game had its wave of popularity before home computers started to take hold, so most people would have never encountered it. But it still found its way into people's homes at the time through electronic handhelds. This is Digits by Coleco from 1979, and it is effectively the same game as Bulls and Cows, presented differently with a few minor distinctions. For one, you can change the skill to only 6 possible values, putting it on par with Mastermind for difficulty. Digits is also very clearly piggybacking off of the design work of pocket calculators with its key layout and brilliant red bubble LEDs for the display, and it probably would have passed for one at school if your teacher didn't get a good look at it. A game is started on it by telling the computer to pick a code, after which it displays C and waits for a guess. The player types in their number, presses try, and the computer validates the guess. Since it only has 7-segment displays to show anything, it tells the player the count of correct value and correct position digits. When you eventually win, since there is no guess limit on this version, it will flash the well-earned 4-0 as your congratulations. Something that took me a while to get, as the numbers it had picked had 3 same digits twice in a row, which really threw me off. This also wasn't helped by another difference, that unlike the pegs and terminal display, Digits has no way of showing you your previous guesses, making it easy to forget what you have already figured out. Their solution to this was to include a pad of guess tracking sheets, which wasn't exactly the most portable solution. A better solution, then, might have been to put LEDs under the keys, like the Merlin, with continuous or flashing patterns to indicate found values and positions. This would have been much more complicated and expensive, though. But if you can wrap your head around manually remembering everything, then this would probably be the closest example to something like Wordle you could get in the 70s, since it is a simple electronic device that fits in your pocket. Except this is still a pure logic game, since it uses numbers and has no patterns. However, there was a pattern-based version of the game before this that plays much more like Wordle. After the success of Mastermind, Invicta started creating offshoot versions, which led to the release of Word Mastermind in 1975. This game is pretty much exactly what would become Wordle, as it has one player choose a word and the other try to guess what it is. Wordle is wildly popular now, so why didn't this version take off? Well, let's open it up and find out. Oh, okay, this is actually pretty easy to figure out. When you're done playing the original Mastermind, you can just take out the response pegs and dump all the color pegs in the box, since there are only 6 kinds that are easy to tell apart. Word Mastermind, on the other hand, has all 26 English letters and some optional letters for other languages that all look pretty much the same. They are meant to be sorted into this divider grid, so you don't have to dig through a pile as you play. Doing this took me 15 minutes, and definitely killed my motivation to play by the time I was done, and likely would have made playing this version seem like a chore more than anything else. But I got there, so let's press on. This version of the game only permits 4-letter words, and I'm very okay with that, since adding extra letters would mean needing even more copies of each letter to sort. It comes with the rules and a list of words you can play printed in the manual and on the box, which can make guessing a little bit easier using the process of elimination, as we'll see. You can actually do this with Wordle as well, since its dictionary is included in the source code of the webpage. Looking through it actually reveals some things that may be frustrating eventually, as it includes swears that most people probably wouldn't expect, but more critically, non-English words, which are very problematic in my opinion. The 6 guesses you get in Wordle are not enough for 26 variations of 5 positions when you don't know the linguistic patterns. Back to the board game though. It starts with the Codebreaker choosing a word and hiding it. It should go in a small box that I'm unfortunately missing, so I'll just use the little shield from the other version. The Codebreaker then picks a word guess. The letters are stood up vertically in the holes, and the same type of black and white pegs are used to validate as before. I have absolutely no idea what these numbered holes are for though, and neither the rules or the picture on the box give any meaningful indication. As with Wordle, as the game progresses, there become fewer likely candidates of words that can match, since they have to be valid English. I would probably add a house rule against looking directly at the list of remaining options, because it makes it much easier to match guesses when you don't have to remember the words yourself. Aside from that, the game is played pretty much the same way as before, and the answer must be found within 10 guesses to win, after which you get the fun of the tedious cleanup process. This version of Mastermind is absolutely more fun to play, because it feels like you're making blind guesses much less often, which makes it more rewarding when you find a match. I don't think such a thing exists, but if there was an electronic version of Word Mastermind, it would probably be my favorite variation of the game. At least that gap is somewhat filled by Wordle now. And that's it for my voyage through some of the predecessors of Wordle. The basic puzzle game concept from 50 years ago is still holding strong today and has reached a new level of cultural interest. I suspect this time particularly because of the limit to 1 word a day keeping players from burning out on it quickly. But being a mess-free electronic version has definitely helped as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video of looking at all of these. This is a slightly different one for me, but similar to my video on Blip I did a while ago. But I just kind of had fun doing this, and especially checking out the computer versions, which I didn't know about before this project. If you enjoyed this video, you may want to subscribe, and if you want to help support the channel, you could buy a t-shirt or look in the description for other options. That's it for now though, and I'll see you next time.